So let's get started. Yes, so I want to welcome everyone who's tuning in today to our Business Success Skill series. Today we speak about how to bring your design firm to the next level, or how you can grow your design firm. And with me, we have two extraordinary experts in this field. And I'm thrilled, Margaret, to have you here today.
Thank you.
I don't think neither of you really need an introduction, but I thought, one sentence for both of you. Margaret is the SVP and Global Director of Wimberley Interiors. And, the whole Wimberley group, has over 500 creative minds working all around the globe. And Margaret, I think under your leadership, you opened, 6, 7 international offices all around the world. And I'm especially excited because you come from the hospitality world, and I feel in the hospitality world you have a lot of very well organized companies where on the residential side we can still learn a lot. So I'm really excited to hear from you your experiences and how you have learned how to approach growth in the past. So thank you for joining.
Of course, thank you for having me.
And then Jamie also doesn't need an introduction. I mean, Jamie, I think you've gotten every award in the residential design field that one can get, a D100, LDecor's A-lists, and many, many more. Also, you have a lot of experience. You've also taken a partner in with Caleb. What I also find so amazing that you've been a front runner in a lot of different ways. Whether it be style, whether it be, in the community. So I'm really thrilled to have you here today. And for everyone who likes celebrities, I think it's also okay to say that you designed Madonna's home, or one of Madonna's homes, Mayor Bloomberg from New York. So you have also a very long list of incredible houses that you've done. So thank you for joining. And I'm really thrilled that we're here today. And last but not least, I'm Benni Frowein. I'm Schumacher's president, hosting also these series that we host every second week, Business Success Skills. And for everyone who is joining the first time, you can also go to YouTube and see the past webinars, topics about how to charge a client, how to avoid client pitfalls. So there's a lot of really, really good topics. And I speak every time with different participants. So it's also a very nice way to get to know more of your colleagues and in the interior design community. So that was a lot of talking. From now on, I will only ask questions. But before I start, I want to let everyone know that we've prepared some questions that I think are going to cover most of it. We're going to speak 30, 40 minutes. And then if you have questions, please, if you hover over with your mouse, you have the Q&A button at the bottom, and you can click on that and type in a question. If you have a question, please write it down. Try to keep it short because I have to speak, see, and read and ask. That makes the life easier for me. So, what I wanted to start, and Margaret, maybe we just start with you. When you started, what was your vision when you started your leadership role? Did you have a vision? Like, how did you start all of this? Because I'm wondering, when you're an interior designer and early in your career, do you just start, or do you have the big goal there?
Well, early in my career, I was going to be a lawyer, and it was pure kismet. My first temp job out of college, because my father was going to pay for law school. My first temp job, and Jamie, you might remember Kelly's Services. My first temp job was with Trisha Wilson of Wilson Associates. So it was almost like pure dumb luck. I went, they asked if I knew how to cut mat board, and I said, yes, I did, because I took courses in college. I helped with a presentation for the Bankers Trust offices in Cairo, Egypt. I think really, Benny, when you talk about career, so I had no intention of going into interior design. I came from a family, my dad was a doctor, but we didn't have interior designers floating in and out of our house doing my mother's interiors. So it was a whole new world for me, but it was incredibly lucky. And I think that part of that, what's a really important lesson for people, is to always be looking up, especially in this day when everyone's walking around with their devices. always be looking up because you may just miss something. So I am a real doer. I'm a worker, serious, serious worker. I literally started at the bottom. I was answering phones. I was cutting mat board. I was cleaning sample rooms. And I went back to school for interior design at night. That's how I started. I think that, in my career, I've been very, very lucky that I've had incredible mentors, Trisha Wilson being my first one. And that's where I really learned the tools of the trade. I was approached by WHEG to head up their interiors department. So Wemberley Interiors is the interior design studio of WHEG, incredible architecture firm. And what my plan was there, Benny, was that they knew that there were architects dabbling in interior design. And Jamie, I don't know about you, but I always negative sold architects of like, that's what happens when you get an architect to do your interiors. See, that's what happens. So, and I'm not, I'm not bashful in saying that. So WHEG, who I highly respected, I worked with them in Singapore, I worked with them in California. They had worked with the best interior designers in the world. And they said, we need you to come in and start, there was an existing practice, but they said, we need you to reorganize and redefine and really restructure and rebuild interiors at the level of Class A level that we're experienced working with. So I knew that I needed to go in. And at that point, I had been with Wilson for 29, maybe over 30 years. I headed up the New York office of Wilson Associates. And I knew the one thing that I needed to do was to hire people that were better than me and to absolutely let them do what they were great at. So the whole premise being that we needed to do great interior design that could sit right next to our architects who were doing great architecture. It's actually pretty scary when I first started, because I wasn't sure if I could do it. I wasn't sure if I could recruit the people that I needed to. This was 9 years ago. And it was still early on when interior design firms did not sit under the roof of architecture firms. So that was really my whole goal of making sure that we could do great work that was commensurate with what the architects were doing.
And I think you said a lot of very interesting things, but what really stuck with me is that you said you're a hard worker, because because it's interesting. I obviously also speak with a lot of interior designers and principals and so on, and I hear this a lot, that it has a lot to do with just working hard. I think the second thing that I'm really taking away is that you say don't miss looking up. I think that's a really nice thing, so that you see left and right. And thank you very much, Margaret.
That's an interesting comment about the hard work. So as you mentioned, Benny, one of our great clients of 30 plus years is Mike Bloomberg, and Mike famously
so love him.
I'm not the smartest guy, but I was the first one in the office. I started out first at Lehman Brothers, and they would see me, my boss would see me there every day before anybody else was there, and I just worked harder. Now, obviously, he's a very smart man, but that's the way he views it, is just those who work harder get further.
And I think also, Margaret, because, I wanted to say three things, and then, while I was speaking, I forgot the last point, but also, hiring people that are smarter or better or than you, I think that's a very interesting point, because it shows a lot of confidence also, understanding where our strengths are and understanding where we have opportunities, and to, fit that in order to make the magic happen. So I found that very inspirational.
The one thing that I will say, and my husband, who's an ex-Wall Street guy, told me one day, it was kind of a rude awakening. He goes, Mag, and he calls me Mag, he goes, you're getting older, right? And I said, I still think I'm 26 years old, Jamie. I don't know about you, but I do believe I'm 26 years old. And I said, yeah, I know. He goes, you have to let people get in front of you. And it's probably some of the best advice I've ever gotten, because you have to remember that at some point your passion may shift. For me with Wemberley, it has shifted where it's probably a bit more managing people and managing teams around the world, where I need to know that there are these great young talented designers that I absolutely need to put in front of me. and that was an important lesson for me. It was important. It was humbling. It was humbling too.
Mhm.
Very interesting. Thank you for sharing also the very honest experience, Margaret. Jamie, how did you start? What was your vision when you started? Did you think of like one day you want to be the famous Jamie sitting right here in front of this beautiful painting? Or how did you start? I'm dying to understand that.
So I think we all have notions when we're young of where we may be in life. And I moved to New York in 1975. And then Studio 54 opened. And so where I wanted to be was, I thought, well, by my mid-20s, I want to be hanging out with Halston and Liza and Steve and have a penthouse on Fifth Avenue. And thank goodness I didn't end up with Halston and Liza and Steve.
Yeah.
Everybody else with all the mess and problems. And I realized by my mid-20s that, gee, I'm not going to get into those buildings anyway at that point. So why think about it? And so I just focused on working. But really how I started was totally just by chance. There was no great plan. I got 2 projects literally 2 days after I graduated from Parsons in 1978. And they were a friend and her boyfriend and the boyfriend's very rich father. And she called literally 2 days after graduation and said, Errol and his father both are taking new apartments. They thought you might want to do it. So I was like, okay, that's what I'll do. And so my great plan, strategy, I would say for the first decade was just to pay the bills. I mean, there was no plan. It was just feel my way through it. And I had taken one business aspects of interior design class at Parsons, which was not really a course that the day program approved of. I had to battle to take it and then battle to get credit for it. But the contract that I took away from that class was what I used for probably 15 years, basically. So I guess I had a strategy to pay attention and work hard. But beyond that, not much.
Very interesting. What, Jamie, you know, like we wanted to speak about like how you grew your business and so on. But let's talk, you know, I'm not even sure that's only, you know, there's only advantages. So I would love to hear what you think the advantages are of staying small and what the advantages are of becoming bigger. And Margaret, I will ask you after that too, because it's a different world that you are in, but I think it's also very relevant. What made you decide, you know, what are the advantages of growing? What would you say now in hindsight, what it would be if you kept being small?
So our practice, our firm, Drake Anderson, and its predecessor, Drake Design Associates, we've never been terribly big. I mean, Margaret, you have a firm of 500 creatives. We are at the largest that we ever were, we were 24. And then we had the economic downturn of 2008. And we had to get smaller. And we shrunk to 14 people. And then we never got much bigger than that after. So that was a great lesson. And we actually grew our volume a lot, our dollar volume. And I guess that meant our productivity too. So it taught me about staying tight and staying focused. I think for me personally, one of the advantages of being small is I tend to be, I guess, a control freak. I say that in my deepest recesses, I'm a codependent, because basically what I do is I'm going to make your life perfect. Everything's going to be perfect. And everything on this table will stay the way it is for the rest of eternity and be beautiful and perfect. And so we fix people's lives. And so the small thing works for me personally. I don't know that I could get beyond 20, 25 people and not feel like I was losing control.
But let me ask you, you know, because for many, a team of 14 is already very big. How do you think compares a team of 14 versus a team of 2 or 3?
A team of 14 allows us to do more. A team of 2 or 3, I think, is quite limited. I always marveled at our wonderful dear friend, the late Mario Boada, who famously at max would have 1 assistant and basically never liked to work with people, just didn't get along, and yet produced masses of work. I don't know how that could possibly be done. And I think that one of the things I've also had to learn is just, as much as I'm talking about being a control freak, is also to step back and say, okay, they might not do it as I would have done it or as quickly as I would have done it, but you can't do it all. And so you got to breathe and step back and say, if it takes them 5 trips to go pick the right pillow trim, that's what's got to be done, even if I could do it in 4 minutes, because I don't have the time to go get there to take those 4 minutes.
Interesting. Margaret, what was your experience? Advantages smaller versus bigger?
Well, it's interesting, Jamie, because when you do think about 25 is such a nice number. Everyone's got a sweet spot. And for us, where it really starts is the culture. Culture is extremely important to me in all the studios. And what can tip the scales of that culture feeling very collegial, very collaborative, is when you start to go mega size. For us, we had one studio that went up to 40, and the wheels sort of start to fall off. It's less communication. It's people going off on their own. It's less collaboration. Everyone's just racing to get stuff done. It's also a big engine to fuel. It's a really big engine fuel. Our sweet spot really is about 25, 30 per studio. And company-wide for WATG, we have 500 people, but for Wembley Interiors, we have about 100. And that really works well for us because it's that boutique within a large firm that clients really like. Jamie, I'm sure clients want to know that they can pick up the phone and get you.
Yes.
Clients want to know that they can pick up the phone and get me.
And they always can.
Yeah, and they want to know in London.
Right.
Yeah, in London, they want to know they can get a hold of Rachel. In LA, it's Stacy. In Singapore, it's Deepu. It is that level of service that when you start to go really large, you tend to, no one likes to feel that they're, one within a million. Clients want to feel like they have your undivided attention. And for us, that formula works. And service is really important. I think that when you start to go super large, sometimes service suffers.
You talk about teams, even in our firm, which is smaller though, we also always make sure that the clients understand from the beginning that it is a team. And although they can reach that if they really want to have an information like, when is the sofa coming? We're the ones not to call. It's a member of the team. And,
exactly. Exactly.
That's a part of
it. So when I speak with interior designers, I hear, most of the case I hear 2 things, and I would love to hear your perspective and your experience on that, Jamie, is that, number one is if you grow and maybe you don't even need 14, maybe you grow from 1 or 2 people to 5 or 6, that you have a more even and balanced out income, through the time, because you just have more leverage and you don't jump from one project to the other and you go, through valleys all the time. I think that's one point. And the other point that I heard is, but at the same time, you get to do less and less design work and you start managing more and more. And that a lot of designers feel, interesting, I actually started this business to design and now I start managing people. What's been your experience there, Jamie?
So you're right about the roller coaster, and that was the first few years of my business, was getting used to having an uneven income flow, because I was a young burgeoning firm and we didn't just have this endless pipeline of work where one project leads into the next project, into the next project at different phases. And so once I got used to that and figured that out, and it became steadier as we got more and more projects, then it became the notion of, I'm going back long enough, of course, to 1978, when you used carbon paper and typewriters, or I hand wrote, a duplicate purchase order, a quadruplicate or whatever, with carbon paper, and I didn't want to do it anymore. And so the first employee was not another designer; it was somebody to do the bookkeeping and the purchase order production, because that was the part I didn't like to do and didn't want to do. You know, I think literally when I first started, I would go into showrooms with a checkbook and write a check to Brunswick and Fee or Schumacher for the order. And as we grew, we are a collaborative effort, so I do like to still design, but yes, I'm absolutely involved in management, in sales, probably more than I am in day-to-day design. But I get my design jollies because I'm fast at it and I'm a great editor. I really know that I'm a really strong editor, so I can go in and hopefully not go, oh, what are you, crazy? That's awful. But to explain, you know, I don't think that that's what the client meant as bright. I think as bright, they meant really bright. This is still grade. I think we have to take into account that all these textures are too similar, those kind of editing things, and explain it as I'm editing so that it is an educational process as well and supportive.
Margaret, how do you feel about those two arguments? You know, the valleys and that you end up managing. I mean, how much design work do you still do?
Well, you know, it's interesting because very similar to what Jamie is saying, you experience that in any business that, you know, listen, this is, especially now, it's a very, very volatile time. And there are peaks and valleys. Our business follows the economy, you know, whether it's developers, residential, whether it's the stock market, you know, there's money for development or renovation or even building houses, or there isn't. And I think, you know, we're having this conversation now with one of my studio directors. You have to do what you love, you know, and if design is part of it, and I will give advice to people, you know, even some of my friends that I used to work with who started their own firms, they're like, oh my God, I'm spending all this time running across the street and through the parking lot to go to Staples and get everything. I said, the most efficient use of your time is what you're best at. And however you need to supplement that, whether it's having an admin assistant contract for a couple of hours a week, whatever it is, that's what you should do. And you should be very honest with yourself of what your skills are. You know, Jamie talks about doing sales. Now, listen, I used to love to get down into the nitty gritty. I used to love to go to the D&D building, and I know there are people watching, but now you kind of have to put a gun to my head to do all of that. It's not my passion. It's not what I'm great at. What I think I'm really good at is sales, managing teams, and giving them the tools that they need. So what anyone out there who's even starting a business or in the middle of a business, you have to really think about what you are best at and be brutally honest with yourself about what that is. You know, Jamie talks about being a control freak, and if anyone from my studio is watching, I used to be a wicked control freak and couldn't delegate if my life depended on it. And, you know, Trisha Wilson at the time had a really tough conversation with me about it, about, you know, you need to start to delegate, because if you want to grow and if you want to do what it is that you love to do in this business, you're going to have to switch gears. You know, you have to calibrate, you have to graduate up to the next level. And as you graduate up to the next level, unfortunately, there are housekeeping duties that you have to tend to. It's the business side of it. It's the what's in your pipeline. Where's the work going to come from? You know, as you get more staff, how are you going to keep them busy and everything else? So that's a natural evolution. And there are some people who are absolutely cut out for it, and some people who aren't.
It's very interesting.
I don't know if I answered your question.
No, you do. You know, I think number one, you do. I think it's very interesting to think about, you know, you don't grow just for the sake of growing. You actually grow and you actually hire. And Jamie, you said something similar. You hire someone for things that you either don't feel you're really good at, or that you can concentrate on the things that you think you're really good at and that are fun, you know, because as an entrepreneur with all the risk and business and stress, you know, you take on, why would you then also do the things that you don't like, you know? And normally you're actually even better at the things you like. So that's what I'm taking away from.
So I had my pivot moment, Margaret, as you talked about, in a variant thing 4 years ago when Caleb and I joined forces, and that I decided that it was time for me to have a business partner. And so that's been a very interesting time in the last 4 years. It's been great, allowing me to grow differently.
Yeah. Margaret, at what point do you decide to hire someone? Do you create a complex Excel file? Do you do this more intuitive? So because I'm asking that for an interior designer with a team of one or two, like when do you know that you should hire the next person? No, we lost her. So Jamie, I ask you the question.
Yes, absolutely. So I think when you are tossing and turning all night long in your bed from stress about how you're going to get everything done. I think that you need to be certainly attuned to hiring somebody when you can afford to, but maybe even you have to jump a little bit ahead to the next step and see the future if you're very busy. And it could be a creative. It could be, for me, it was administrative support and bookkeeping and that kind of thing. I think that in this day and age, it's so much different than when I started because there's so many consulting services available, even with people you may never meet in person.
Yeah.
So.
Interesting. So, if we discuss different avenues of growing, I think we've, Margaret is back. Hi, Margaret.
I'm so sorry. I'm so
no.
sorry. What happens when you're in the middle of nowhere? I'm so sorry.
Totally fine. It was a great special effect. So, and we were very flexible and just shifted over to Jamie, but now I can ask you the question too. So, how do you decide to hire another person? How do you know? Do you have a complex Excel file? Do you do this intuitively? How do you decide that?
It's definitely about project load. When we're doing staffing, listen, it can get, the bigger you get, the more long and involved it is. We see what's coming down the pike, as I'm sure Jamie, there can be a freight train coming and you're trying to figure out how to hire the right people, or it could be a really slow moving car that's heading towards you. I do not believe in building a church for Easter Sunday. I have always been, after 2008, which Jamie talked about, that was so profoundly, it was such a seismic event and it was such a learning experience for me that I have always proceeded with caution. I am the type of person, I do not like letting people go. I do not like, having to lose staff. I'm in it for the long haul, and anyone that we hire, the intention is that we're in it for the long haul. So I have always proceeded very, very carefully, sometimes to the detriment of my staff. I mean, they're ready to jump off a cliff. They're so busy until we hire. But the one thing I have learned probably in the last year, that Joshua Levesque, my admin director, he really has his finger on the pulse of what's going on in the studio. And he's in charge of staffing and dealing with the staff and figuring out what we need, what assistance we need. Because 9 times out of 10, I'm traveling and don't perfectly have my finger on the pulse.
Interesting. So Margaret, next question again to you, because I find this very interesting again to learn like how you from a large company in the hospitality world think about it. If you think about different avenues of growing, you can just grow your staff and hope that you do more of the same. You can take in partners, you can start licensing deals under a name. You can expand into residential. You can internationally expand. So there's different avenues of how you grow. I would love to understand two things, like how you think about it. And number two is if you were a small design firm, how would you assess what the right path is, or what would be your advice?
We're always watching. Well, simply put, it's the desires of my designers. I have 2 designers that love residential. And, my first mentor, Trisha Wilson, I'd come up with an idea and I said, what do you think? She's like, what's the worst thing that can happen? Try it. And if it doesn't work, move on, stop doing it. And, but, I don't like to say that we go by the seat of our pants, but we are very strategic. In hospitality, the one thing that we're hearing, first of all, I'm a very big believer, stick to what you know and that you're excellent at. Now, the one thing that at Wemberley, what we didn't have is that we didn't have a good food and beverage designer. And we have one in London who has joined us from Black Sheep. And then in New York, we knew that we were missing a lot of opportunities. So it's a year ago, I think yesterday, we hired Josh Held, who was originally at Rockwell, then had Josh Held Design, does stuff that we cannot even, none of my designers can do. And what's great is that my designers say, never in a million years could I do what he does. And what you have to do is for me, a big part of it is human nature is to hire people who are just like you, who look like you, who act like you. And that's not necessarily a good thing to be, unless you just want to continue to do the same old, same old. And I spoke to my creative director, and we've been together for years. I said, we need a disruptor. We need to shake this up, because we will not expand unless we do it. And for us, it's different project types. So Josh Held, who, wears great jewelry, polishes his nails, is the most lovely person on the planet. We hired him, and he handles food and beverage and entertainment, along with Damien in London. Residential, and Jamie, I have to say, that is a very complicated lane to swim in. We can get food and beverage from our hospitality clients. We do get a little bit of residential, but that's a whole different networking system. It's a whole different social strata. It is a whole different kettle of fish. And we do have 2 designers in our LA office who started to pursue it. And we start to look at that. So what we have gotten into is we've dabbled in residential so far, and we have really established F&B. But you got to look strategically as what is in your marketplace, what opportunities could you be missing, and really what's your passion, or what are your designers' passions?
Yeah, I think also what you said, you stick to your guns, like stick to what you know. I mean, what you say, residential is so different from hospitality. I'm sure that also applies the other way around, like, if I have a firm of 1 or 2 people, should I branch out now the first thing into hospitality if I know how residential design works? Probably not. But I would love to hear, Jamie, you did a couple of different things, like licensing and taking on a partner. I would love to understand maybe your journey too, like how you've been thinking throughout the years about how to grow your business.
I think you have a good point there, Benny, because Margaret, to be perfectly honest, many times over the years when I'd be interviewed and they'd say, what haven't you done that you would love to do? I've always said a hotel. And we have gotten a few RFPs over the time, but we've never been awarded a project. And I think it's hard to break into another lane, especially one that has sort of specific expertises. I think that as much as you said earlier, how difficult residential is, I think, but on the other hand, people are willing to take a chance on residential. And with huge investments and huge investors on hospitality projects, typically they're not. And that goes also to your, to looking in the mirror and seeing your strengths and your weaknesses. Benny, I've had licensed product for a number of years. And many designers think that's the way to go to increase their footprint and their income. And the reality is, unless you actually have a name, you're likely not to get a deal. I know designers who are lovely people, talented, have charm, but are chasing these deals that they're never going to get. It's just not realistic. Every once in a while, there may be a designer who's truly has such a brilliant, a special point of view and can come up with such unique product that there might be an opportunity, but I think that's going to get, those opportunities are going to get smaller and smaller in this day and age, especially going forward. So I think the way to really continue to grow your business and evolve is to think about marketing more, think about, for a residential designer, show houses. I've done tons of show houses over the years. I sit on the board of Kips Bay Boys and Girls Club. For me, show houses have been valuable for getting work and for also having an opportunity to meet the press because getting press in the residential sphere is very important. You mentioned being on the lists. That's very important for marketing. In this day and age with so many consumers who just Google top designer New York, and to be able to pop up in some lists is pretty crucial. And to go back to me to look at how to continue to grow the business but not have my stress increase was to have a senior person by my side, and I just decided to do that as a partnership with Caleb. We're, in our it was over 4 years ago, and that really has achieved the goals that I wanted.
Interesting. Yeah, I think, I also hear a lot that people like the licensing avenue because they say, the income becomes more steady. You just have like I also met a couple of interior designers who started, maintenance, kind of, house management, of vacation homes where they just, do that stuff and, you get a monthly income. Have you tried that at all?
Well, not exactly that way, but after a fashion, we have projects that we've been continually sort of working on in one fashion or another for decades, meaning some of it is just maintenance. It's like refresh this, recover that, order more sheets, order more tabletop. And then eventually let's redo that bathroom. We don't have a maintenance branch specifically to make sure that when they arrive, there's eggs and butter in the fridge.
And Margaret, would you suggest that, so I'm a small interior design firm. I've done a couple of projects in the last 12 months. Would you suggest I reach out to my clients and ask, whether we can do some maintenance or whether we can look at the bed sheets or tabletop, or whether, I don't know, Thanksgiving is coming and whether we should look at something when the family comes? Or do you find that aggressive or too direct sales?
No, what Jamie is describing is the magic of the return client, the client that you have forever, which is what we all want to do. I've had hotels. I've been fortunate enough to work for firms where there's some hotels that I've renovated 3 times. And that is the magic of having a return client. And it really is about doing great work, being there for your clients, being passionate, and really, to me, it's doing whatever it takes. When they see you, I did have a residential client once who we did a hotel in Boston, and he had me fly to Boston because John Mellencamp was coming for the weekend, and he was just he's like, my study's a mess and I need you to come here and fix it. And I got on a plane and I flew to Boston and I fixed his study. I rearranged some guitars, I did something, whatever. But he was someone that knew that I would be, now listen, some people may think that that's crazy, but to me, it's about service, as crazy as we think it may be. And that really is the magic of the return client. You want your designers that are listening want to be the first person that a client calls to say, would you mind, replacing the sheets, or how do I get new lampshades, or I want to spruce up and have slip covers out on the veranda for the summer. If you are really taking care of your client, they will call you back. And I think it's actually quite a good idea, Benny, about, spring cleaning, something like that. If people need to, if you want to think of a service that you can provide, just say spring is sprung. And sometimes you just have to, I don't think it's being too aggressive. I think it's just sending an email, thinking of you, and is there anything that we can do for you? I think that what's also really important, and I'm sorry I'm giving you such a long-winded answer, is that you don't want to be a fair weather friend. You don't want to call your clients just when you know they have a project. The magic of creating long-lasting relationships is always being there, thinking of you, hope all is well. We don't just pack up and leave and, clients never hear from us again. It's that magic of staying in touch, I think. And Jamie, clearly you have clients that have been with you forever who wouldn't make a move without you. And that's a testament to you and your practice.
I had an email this morning for a client with a client of about 30 years, maybe a little longer. She's in her 80s, and just checking in, did that lining on the back of the Roman shade that's this big get taken care of yesterday? Yes. Now, I don't know how many more projects she has in her, but she's had many over the years. The amazing thing, I think, in the residential industry at the high end is that downsizing now is not contracting. It's almost always getting bigger, because we do work for people of comfort and blessing, and they think to the future when they might not be as mobile. They need more space to put a caretaker in who may never hopefully arrive, but redoing that way and increasing space, not decreasing space. Clients of a certain age who embrace new projects. So I was in Florida for 2 weeks, reinstalling a house that we did for lovely clients, a second home of a certain age a few years ago. Benny, I know you mentioned about, was it too pushy to reach out to a client? I think that many people have had to think about at the beginning of the pandemic and the shutdown, business came to a roaring halt. And I think that many of the webinars I've been on, and I'm sure you've heard this, is stay in touch. And we sent out notes to all of the clients we could think of, past and present, not to say, can we do anything specifically for you? But as you talked about, Margaret, touching base, how you doing? This is how we see things. And we've learned to work remotely, and we're doing things. So you plant the seed that we are available. And we had some replies from clients who are moving forward with new projects that the conversations began then.
Sure. Peter Lehrer, the founder of Lehrer McGovern Bovis, he started it from his kitchen table. And he told me once, another great piece of advice that I got. He said, Margaret, the one thing that I learned, there is no project too small if you have a great client. And just to that, the Roman shade comment, if it's a great client that has been loyal to you for years, and that's loyalty is what you really want to try to foster and grow.
Interesting.
I'm right about that, because I think back to when I mentioned my first two clients, a father and son, 2 days after college. I used to say, how did you start? People would say, I said, well, we're in a business where you actually don't need any capital. I used to say you need a piece of paper and a writing instrument, well, you don't need those anymore. And you need a client, because that's all we really need is a client, because we're selling ideas. Their money is the capital that funds these things coming to a reality.
Absolutely.
And that hasn't changed really. So now what you say, you need a phone and a client.
Yeah.
So talking about a phone and a client, let's switch gears. We have 15 minutes left and we have a lot of questions. So what I would love to do is to start reading some questions, and maybe we can give very short, sharp answers to it. And I think, Jamie, I want to start with what you just said and ask that question to Margaret, because Margaret, you said before you're really good at sales. So we're going to test you here now. So how to get a phone is easy. I go to a shop and buy it. But how do I get a client? How do you suggest to someone, how you gain a new client? How do you network, to reach the right client? What would be your advice there?
Yeah, I didn't say I was really great at sales. I really love sales. Therefore, I think I'm pretty good at it. But listen, and I was thrown in at the deep end and just had to learn on my own. Trisha Wilson was like, here, try it. And it's number one about networking. It's about networking and knowing where to hunt. And Jamie, I don't know if we have an analogy. You're a hunter. Do you hunt it? Do you kill it? Do you drag it home and throw it on the grill and let someone cook it? And that's what my designers do. You have to know where to hunt. And it's an analogy that I think some people can relate to, because what we realized when we started going into residential in LA, which I know nothing about, you start going to realtors groups and get together in associations. And Jamie, you can probably talk about residential, but it's networking. It's talking to everyone. In hospitality, I talk to, purchasing agents, furniture manufacturers, everyone. You have to know who your community is, and you have to not necessarily figure it out, but really share information. It goes both ways. You can try partnering up with someone who's doing something in another region that you're really interested in, start talking to them. That's how I started networking. I can't impress upon you enough that networking with your community is really important.
And I think thank you, Margaret, also for mentioning that it's not just homeowners that you hope to find somewhere. It's the furniture manufacturers, it's the realtors, it's really the whole like 360-degree circle. I think that's important because you never know where it comes from, the next thing.
It's people in the D&D. It's your whole community. As I said, you got to look up because you never know where it's going to come from. You just never know.
Thank you. Jamie, a question for you in 1 or 2 sentences. How do you approach a project that doesn't fit into your own design formula and manage a team so they get on board?
I think that's a great question, and I have to say that I'm lucky that I get very bored doing the same thing day in and day out. Sorry about that.
It's a client calling.
Yes, exactly. No, yeah, well, it was a client, a very dear friend who's a client. I get excited by new ideas, by doing something different and out of the box. And I try to embrace that and understand what it is that the client wants. And just today, I said to one of the designers who's working on the project, I said, no, that is not a bright color. I said, it's grayed and it's muted. She likes bright, and I capitalized bright. She wants it bright. And the designer wrote back, this is really a little bit out of my comfort zone, but she said it in a really nice way. And that, so this is a great opportunity for me to learn and do something different. But this has been going on for a few days with different samples going back and forth. And of course, here's the challenge of not working in a physical office together. We're not just doing it, we're going back and forth via emails or Zoom. But I embrace things that are not necessarily in my zone, and I enjoy trying to through my eye.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Elizabeth Horn asks, Margaret, maybe you have an answer to this question. How important do you think the design degree is? I have a college degree, but not in interior design. I worked for a big designer who I learned from, but now 10 years in and very successful myself. I wonder if I should go back to school too.
I think is she doing residential or is she doing hospitality?
I think
residential. So. Listen, I have friends who never went to design school who are geniuses, who are really, really incredible and were able to back themselves with a team who could do the technical part of it, who could do the CAD, could do the Revit and all of that. If she's really successful and if she thinks that there are holes in her practice that she can recognize and see, either hire someone to fill that void, or she should really look at the business side that she feels that she needs to see. And as I said, I went back to school at night because I knew nothing about the interior design world, and I really needed to hone my skills and sharpen them. So I went back to school. But if she's doing fine and really successful, if it's not broken, why fix it?
Okay, great.
Jamie, I don't know if that was totally an irresponsible response, but Jamie, do you have something to say about it?
Well, you did mention what I would say. What I usually counsel people is at least take a drawing class, because if you don't, I don't do CAD, but I know how to draft. And if you don't know how to draft, you don't know how to read a drawing. And if you can't read a millwork drawing because you don't understand what the drawing process is, then you're cooked in this day and age.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's helpful, Jamie. Thank you. Other question, anonymous attendee. Jamie, what factors went into your decision to hire a business partner or to join with a business partner?
So I definitely wanted to, I do now think about things strategically, and I was looking at myself 10 years down the road. So I started this thought process when I was 59. I'm not somebody who wants to work till 90. I thought, around 70 is probably a good time to say, let's eat lunch and eat chocolates and travel the world. And how to continue growing and making sure that our clients are serviced, because not all of our clients are in their 70s and 80s. We luckily have some in their 20s and 30s. Of course, now I have a partner who's in his 30s, but even before him, I still felt I had a validity. And so that was the way I decided to do it. I decided it wasn't hiring somebody. It was to really have a partner and change the name of the firm to really state that he's a full partner.
Yeah, thank you. So a question for you, Margaret. Is it possible for a residential decorator to break into hospitality on any level, even just considering working at a firm like yours to learn that business model?
It's so funny. The word decorator, it's so residential, where we look at it as interior designers. We've had some great residential designers cross over and join us. You know, there's lots of technical parts to hospitality. And as long as you have a really strong team, I will say where the residential designer has worked really well is probably in our high-end suites. Not necessarily guest rooms or lobbies, but they definitely bring a beautiful aesthetic. So we've had residential designers cross over. Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you. We also just had a comment from an attendee, Judith, and I want to just quickly read it, because I think it's important also that we clarify that. So Judith says, I'm sorry that I don't agree at all about design school. I'm sure you have friends who are talented, but if there was nothing to learn, why would there be so much fine education available? Just because she's doing residential doesn't mean that there isn't lots to learn. Look at the NYSID catalog. I think, just, to say, I think, Margaret, I don't want to speak for you, but we all agree there's
Right.
lots to know. And it's absolutely, we all believe that great design is very difficult to do, right? I think you said, if you can't do it, have a support system that really knows how to do it.
And you could be a great visionary. And Judith is right, licensing in New York State, and there is plenty to learn. It depends on the capacity that you're doing this. And I always think of interior designers are different, and this is the world that I come from, decorators. You could be decorating a space, accessorizing, putting a layer on it. But if you're really doing the interior design, you are doing millwork, you are doing every nut and bolt that goes into this house. That is completely different. So I apologize on that comment. Judith has a good point. It depends at what level you're going in, for sure. Jamie, do you agree?
Yes, and as an alumna of Parsons School of Design and a board member, I totally believe in design school. And I think there are different places and different levels of professional tax to take in this day and age. Of course, there was the old notion of the 10%er, which was somebody in the neighborhood who had lovely taste and helped her neighbor decorate. They don't really exist anymore, especially at the high end. That was why I was saying at least take a drafting course so you can read the construction documents, because all of our top projects have massive construction involved in them.
Yeah.
Right.
And that takes expertise.
And we have another question about the ASID exam. And Jamie, maybe it's also interesting to hear from your perspective on that. What about that exam, the ASID exam, as a credential for a working designer? What weight does that carry?
So I am not just a proud ASID member, but I am FASID. I got the great honor of being elected to the College of Fellows a few years ago. And I remember when I was very young, I got involved with ASID just because I thought, somebody's got to have a voice for our industry. And I don't know that I believe in everything they're doing. I'm going back now, what am I going back? 35 years, 37 years. But I knew that it was important. And then I did take the NCIDQ test. That's the test, not ASID's test, but NCIDQ. And I went in to take it, and I thought, oh, I have to be out of here at 2 o'clock. I have to pick up something new to wear to go for tonight, and da-da-da. And I expected to just breeze through, and it was one hell of a test, a tough test. And
Yeah.
I think the old statistic used to be 70% of people failed it on the first time. Luckily, I'm a good tester, and I passed it, but I took all the time it was needed. But it's a very rigorous test. And so it is not about putting together a pretty scheme. It's about codes. It's about suitability. And it's about completing a project in a timely fashion. To spend all your time coming up with a great concept is not the thing to do here, because what you need to do is complete every part of the test, at least with facility. It doesn't have to be fantastic, but it has to be facile and correct.
Yeah, in certain states that we work in, you've got to have licensed interior designers. State of Florida, there are a whole bunch. So licensing is important.
Yeah, I'm licensed in Florida, but I'm guiltily not licensed in New York because I've never done it, but it's not required here.
Uh-huh,
Yeah.
Interesting.
It should be.
So we have 1.5 minutes. And I would love to ask the two of you, Margaret, maybe we start with you again, ladies first. What would be your advice, number one advice to a interior designer who started in the last, couple of years as a small firm, about how to think about taking that company to the next level?
I think that what you want to do is, listen, Jamie said he started out without having a plan. And really, that's kind of how I started. What I always tell my friends in hospitality is grow smartly. Do not grow for the sake of growing. Look at the landscape, see what your opportunity is and what the potential is. I'm a big believer of don't put the cart before the horse. You may have to roll up your sleeves and work a little harder for a little while, but you want to make sure that you've got that client solidified before you move forward. And I think especially in this climate, you need to grow at a healthy pace and don't overextend yourself. How you live your normal life is how you should live your business.
Thank you, Margaret. Jamie,
I'd have a variation on that theme. And it goes back to a number of the threads here today. Networking. So those first clients of mine came as friends from high school. And so being nice, being charming, giving back, being a good person, I think leads to work. And I think that the decision about how to grow may be to make sure that you remember those words, how you lead your life every day. And that will lead one person to say to another person, oh, you need a designer? I think you should call my friend. And I think that then you should also think about other parts of networking. How did I get published in the first place? My volunteer work really with ASID led to my first being published in national magazines. Those people didn't know me, but they were sponsors of the events. It's definitely all woven together. And so keep your thread clean and have the knots and bows pretty.
Perfect.
And also to treat people how you'd want to be treated. I mean, there are a couple of golden rules in life that apply to business too. So
yeah. Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, Jamie. It was fantastic. This hour flew by. I learned a lot. I cannot imagine that the rest watching you walked away with, I'm sure, with like full pieces of paper written all down with tips. So thank you very much. It was a pleasure. And I hope that I see you guys soon in person.
Yes, the same.
I hope so too. Be well. Jamie, so much fun.
Great.
You're the best.
Look forward to seeing you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.